All right. Belfaster asks, what are your thoughts on having strong items like that in relatively lower mid-level power dungeons? Was that just a bad mix of dungeon item power? Glowing black stone is another one that comes to mind. I like having a tiny chance for a lower level player to luck into an expensive item, as it helps create cool experiences and stories, and is like winning the lottery at that level. It's an interesting challenge, right? Because if you make it super rare, it'll still get camped, right? Like if it's, hey, this has a chance of, it's a X% chance of dropping off of a NPC that's, got a placeholder and it spawns once every 4 hours or 8 hours or 5 days or 7 days, right? Like you guys have seen that before. And so, people will still do it and they'll be like, God, this camp is horrific, right? In theory, we could have something that could spawn off of anything in the world at a very, very low percentage chance. And, that then you get your ring of power. The idea of putting something in there that's not that hard to camp, not that super rare, but it's in a lower level zone. Then it really becomes a question of, does it become a thing that the lower level actually gets an opportunity to experience? Or is it always camped by higher levels? And if it is always mostly camped by higher levels, is that still okay? Because then there's that one time where it's not camped by higher levels and the lower level people get it, right? And it's like, ooh, fancy. So I think the idea of them existing and it just being a little bit, lengthier of a camp, right? Isn't necessarily a bad one at all. I think, to your more specific question though, why did it end up that way in the beginning? I was talking about that with someone earlier today, actually, offline, and well, not in here. And the thing I think that happened with some of those, items like mana stones and things like that was, one, they didn't really have a super centralized like itemization person that was controlling these things and vetting them. At least not when I got on the team. So if they had one before, that person wasn't there by the time I got on. And then the other thing was, no one really realized that the game would live for more than a year or two. And so with that in mind, wacky stuff was done. Warlock guy said, RuneScape 3 has that with the item. If you have tier 4 luck, everything you do has a chance to drop the super luck ring from skilling to killing. Yeah, there's some... we'll probably play around with some wackier ideas there and see what winds up happening. So the goal is to make a place, first and foremost, right? Like, I don't want to undersell the challenge of it, right? I'm not saying that it's easy to do the following, but I would say it's a bit easier to make a game with shit to kill, with things that make your numbers go up, right? Like, hey, made a game and it's got things that you kill and your numbers go up, experience goes up, you get items or whatever. It's another thing to really make a place that has a atmosphere that just feels like welcoming. When we work on this, since day one, like, I've wanted to make a world that I want to hang out in, right? Because yes, there will be the number chase and the server first and all of the sort of kind of competitive player focus. There'll be the things for you to do and kind of show your clout and all of that. But for me, as someone that plays a shitload of alts, even if I had one like max level tune that's doing, some of the more leading edge stuff, I got the feeling the bulk of my time would probably be on alts. And it'd be nice to just make this world where I enjoy making new characters and hanging out and doing the kind of stuff that I do, which is like simple camps, camping for, doing grueling camps for rare items, interacting with people. It's just, that's that's first and foremost. Like, can we nail the atmosphere? Having an alt problem is fantastic news for us. We love people that love alt. So one of the things that I've got to do as well is the feedback that we've gotten is it's just right now the camps that are here are just set up. They're too easy. They're set up with the idea of, you know, not requiring CC, especially if timing was right, and they're fairly low density population. But I can look at NPC placement. I can look at some more roamers. I went ahead and put in a few roamers, but once you're going, it's not that big a deal. But like this is what at most 2 that you got to deal with when this guy's not patrolling, that type of stuff. That's what's missing for modern MMOs. Used to be about building an immersive world, not running between quest hubs. I think some of that was also incidental, right? It was because systems were not as well designed yet. I mean, we have this discussion. We've had this discussion this week with some of the friends and family and stuff. It's a very tricky line. There's a very tricky line when it comes to designing something well. You know, utilizing all the lessons of, I guess, good design in air quotes over the last 20 years, but also retaining some of the mystery and challenge and other shit, right? Because it gets into some of the feedback where if you give a little bit, then you create an expectation of even more clarity, right? And so it's tell me how to find the thing for the quest, right? And this is an area where I think my views are maybe, they're potentially wrong. I can be a bit controversial in sort of like the degree to which I take my views on this, but it's like if the first quest you get, like if your starter note is a newbie, is essentially saying, hey, find so-and-so, they're going to be in this district, which you can find in this part of town, look for this building, etc., etc. Well, basically the only challenge is the walk at that point. You don't have to figure shit out. You just need to walk there. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe that's acceptable for your starter note. And then we put in some stuff. Yeah, it's an errand, not a quest. Belfaster, I love that so much. I've been trying to figure out, because I've been saying it's a task, not a quest, right? But like an errand, I like that word even better. When we start, and then when we start sort of spelling things out, there's the expectation that they're spelled out. And it's like, oh, well, this wasn't intuitive or this wasn't very clear. Well, yeah, but if it was very clear, then what's the challenge? Especially if you match that against like, hey, you're sending me to fight a thing and I couldn't kill it yet. What gives? Well, get more powerful and then kill it. Like I went up and I handed the guy the thing and then he turned around and he punched me in the face. Okay. Well, but this is a starter quest. Why am I getting punched in the face? And I couldn't even beat him. He's level 2. I'm level 1. Right? Okay. Well, come back with, one of our people did the right thing. Brought somebody else with him and smacked beat the guy and then looted the item that he needed. Perfect. That's and so there's a bit of this, like when I was first looking at the quest, there's a lot of different things that I was playing with. It was like, can I create something where people actually do kind of feel like they need to ask, right? Like, hey guys, I haven't figured this out. Or, there's oh my gosh, I can't do this yet. Well, but it's not like you were sent on a quest to defeat a level 20. You're level 1, you got told to defeat a level 2, right? That type of stuff. I don't know that there's a great answer. I could be dated in my thinking on this, but I do think the more that it turns into like if you're someone that likes to figure stuff out, you can figure it out. It's feasible. It's not like that crazy. But then if you're someone that doesn't like to figure things out, you really won't get it instantly. I think there's value to that because, all right, ask somebody that likes to figure things out. That's the social part of the game. The social part of the game is not just forced grouping through difficulty, right? So that's the kind of, that's the thought on some of this. And then other stuff is, if you come in and the second you kind of peek over the hurdle of certain challenges, that it's behind you. John said there's a really fine line between hand-holding and not enough info. Tough to figure out where that line is. It's really tough. I would say that my tendency, my belief is, for the time being, is to err on the side of not enough info in a sense, right? Err on the side of people maybe perceiving it and going, oh, this isn't ideal, or this isn't good, or I don't like this, and kind of work carefully from there, because a lot of stuff becomes like a slippery slope. Difficulty is often seen as barrier to entry, in quotes, by those who worry about cash. And that's, so don't get us wrong. We want as many people to play this game as we can, without compromising what we think the game should be, and thus acknowledging that as many people may not be a ton of people, right? I would correct your statement, Nicodemus. Nicodemus said, I think the intentional difficulty of EQ was the reason MMOs became so popular. Look at Dark Souls' success. I think the unintentional difficulty of EQ is what got people going. And then in order to appeal to a broader group of people, then we removed more and more of those barriers to entry, and thus the difficulty. But then the difficulty was added back in at the high end or at higher skill level stages, right? So it became more mechanical difficulty, more specific sort of game knowledge as it relates to encounters, or in particular raids, right? And so we were doing that while I was on EQ, intentionally looking at how do we make certain things easier so they're more accessible, and then making other things even more difficult than ever, right? Us adding a graveyard into PoP was actually so that we can make the raids even more difficult without there necessarily being the challenge of corpse recovery after a certain period for certain things. Belfaster said that would be a fun quest. They send you to go deal with someone with a bounty reward. When you roll up on this guy, he had 3 NPCs who are also there to collect said bounty, and he promptly destroys all 3 while you watch. Quest over, you go back and report what you saw. It's funny to think someone would send a butt-naked, washed-up newbie to go kill a badass, which makes it funny to come back and be like, you sent me the wrong guy, I'm not ready for that. Or they leave his corpse, and then you sneak up after they leave and you loot something off of it. With a mud-inspired game, you can always have the option to put more items into chat text. Can be a bit spammy, but having 2 windows like you do can help. We're going to work, there's a lot of stuff with like interactions and stuff going on in text. So when we redo the UI, we'll really be thinking about the best way to tackle that. And we've already agreed as a team to also then put in the like Morrowind style record of interactions that you've had. So we'll be playing with those things as well. John says difficulty helps create social interaction. Social interaction should be both positive and negative, with a heavy weight towards positive. Yes. If it's all happy and positive, there's less sense of triumph and memory. Yep. 1000% agree. Angel said barriers to entry. Essentially anything that may lead to a potential customer churning at some point in the funnel prior to getting to the point where they're converted, so that you've got solid retention of them to maximize their LTV, or at least getting a decent return on ad spend, or getting a ROAS, or getting a decent looking at the average revenue per user. Or I mean, it's just, yeah. So barriers to entry are essentially where are all the points where somebody may decide no longer to play the game. Melia said, man, this is the exact talk we have in e-commerce web dev. I mean, it's the talk that we have in most modern gaming companies and stuff as well. For us, we're taking a kind of a simplified approach on it. And we're, like I said, we're probably, people could say we're shooting ourselves in the foot with some of the stuff or whatever, but right, there are decisions that you can make that you just, I don't know, you just make them and you go with it if you're not looking to like get all the customers. The last company I worked at in Sweden was made a MMO that actually is kind of it's a little more difficult MMO in many senses, and it's older feeling. It's a PC based online horse adventure game for girls. It's a massively multiplayer game. It's very niche, has a very specific audience. If you look at our data, it's very, very specific, even by country, right? Like we could look at a country and tell you the average age of the girls playing in Germany is about a year to 2 years higher than, the core average like US. Sweden, it's a bit younger, right? But they're still installing a old school style MMO on a laptop, usually a hand-me-down or a PC. Very limited to no support for Mac, but we still had folks doing it. And yeah, you pay a subscription or you buy a lifetime. It's just like a lot of the things that are considered barriers to entry in more recent years. And still, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of girls playing it and paying solid cash. Live from Tunlin said, I'm fine with difficulty, raid mechanics, for example, or figuring out dungeon pulls, but sometimes the experience grind was just too exhausting to stay with. Yeah, but I will say the experience grind for a lot of people like me, it's just so simple. It's just effort, right? And so I don't mind an experience grind as much because I get to a good spot or I get in a good group or whatever, and I'll watch TV on the other monitor, right? I'll watch a podcast. I'll chat with the group. And it gives me something consistent that I can do in a world where I can come in, relax. I'm not stressed out. It's meditation, man. It's like open that beer, sit down, especially if you're not the one pulling, drink your beer or your coffee or whatever. Boo, boo, boo. Talk some shit, watch some shows. Yeah, it's cathartic. It's not, in many cases, it's not much different than coming home and plopping down on the sofa for a few hours, which when a lot of people are like, oh man, I've gotten older and, or the audience is older, they don't have the time to play like they used to. Like that may be the case in some cases, but I'd say like Netflix and TV viewing data says maybe that's not true, right? Like there are a lot of people that come home and they'll watch TV for 3 hours a night. Shit, there are people that come home and watch TV for 5 hours a night, right? Get off work at 6. I'm not as worried when folks kind of throw that point back up. What I'm more worried about is like, I'll be honest, and I'm not speaking for everybody on the team. Naturally, we've got people on the team that, at least one person that's very active raider. I would say at least 2 people that are, active raiders, played a shit ton of, MMOs. Our team plays. Everybody has a different background, but there is a lot of commonality in terms of MMO experience. I don't want the pressure of playing in a high performance group. Like I'd rather just camp in like a pretty chill group, and like that's my evening time, right? Like if I had more time, I would be doing it. I'd just be camping, shooting the shit, looking for some other folks every once in a while when we need to fill a gap, and enjoying playing. It's relaxing. I come into an environment like this to kind of get away from things. Belfaster says, I love how different people played EQ than the designer saw the Zatkin interview, where it's saying it was meant for players to dungeon crawl, like an actual D&D scenario, concept of pulling camps, not by design. Just people thinking better, safer, more efficient way. Yeah. And I feel like that is an actual style of gameplay that's been missed for a long time. Running dungeons to me is less fun than camping. Maybe getting to the camp or breaking the camp is great, but then camping, I love it. Steak MCC said, if the experience grind is as bad as EQ, there definitely needs to be other obvious modes of progression that you can make inside of a game session. Holy hell is the first few levels of EQ a quitting point because it's so slow. I'm less. I could definitely see where that might be a concern in later levels, but I think in early levels, it's been less of a factor so far. I know it's come up 1,000, 10,000 times. What's the stance on instancing? Probably not in favor of it, Shaka said. Yeah, so we're going without instancing. Though it was interesting, we had somebody provide feedback and sort of like argue some different points in Friends and Family the other night. It was like, because somebody mentioned that like a level 20 was running around killing everything in Wormsbane, and it was a little disruptive. And then the person was like, well, yeah, that, the better design is to like do trivial load code and stuff like that, so that they won't kill everything. And then the counterpoint was, well, yeah, it may not matter because the person may just be killing shit to be lame or they're bored. And then another person, or then the same person said, yeah, well, that's the problem. Like, if you give an opportunity to people to be lame, they're going to be lame. And they're going to go in and disrupt stuff like that. Which my point was, well, for us, if someone's being lame like that, you know, we've got a small enough community, and as the community scales, we're supporting customer service well enough, then they can just say, hey, come check this out. This person's being disruptive. And then we'll get rid of them. Or we'll put them in jail for a little bit. And any argument that goes beyond that starts to get into the point of, well, that's how instancing happened, right? Because if you start to go like, all right, but if you're too high level for the zone, you can't even engage the mobs. And not only do you not get experience, you don't get loot. Now you can't engage them and blah, 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 blah. It's like, all right, well, once you start tacking on that many like layers of protection to keep people from being assholes, that is one of many factors that went into us adding instancing to EQ back in the day. And we're not doing it here. Been checking out Dragonflight, and nobody ever talks in dungeons. Ask questions, not a word. I had a really great experience in WoW up until probably Wrath of the Lich King, and it became more and more of a, if you're not hitting a certain DPS, then you need to get, you know, GTFO. And I became more and more kind of like, you know, on one hand, I was really, I want to be the dude that doesn't get shit talked and kicked out of the group. But it started chipping away on the, more and more I just was like, and then I was raiding with a bunch of people that like different EQ developers from, Sony developers, going on raids with a lot of them. And it was becoming more and more of a, you know, don't step in this and oh, do that. And I was just like, you know, I just want to chill out on my laptop and watch some TV and yeah. And so it's weird because it just kind of petered out for me. But I also think part of that was I got super bogged down in DC Universe Online development and then just didn't have time to do anything other than be miserable, crunch, and try to get some time at home. Nicodemus said, I think if you have a variety of player experiences, some high octane activities and some chill activities, you should cover all types of players. Some people get off work and just want to chill mentally. Raids are high stress. Yeah, I think it's inevitable that we have a range of activities. The one thing that we shouldn't do this time around, you know, my firm recommendation is we shouldn't start putting all of our eggs in the leading edge basket and spending all of our time and resources trying to retain people that are always going to burn through everything, destroy everything, conquer everything, and oh, what's more? Give me more challenge. Okay, make an alt, or go play some other games for a while and come back when there's new shit. I feel like we dropped the ball on EQ when we started really just being too focused on our high end. And it's that idea of like, you can't lose any players, right? And if you lose the high-end players, they're the most vocal, right? They're gonna get on the front page of their website, their guild website, or they're gonna get in their forum and talk shit about, oh, I've killed everything, the game's over. Okay, well, I think there's a lot of work that we should be doing before the game gets to the point where that is the game in the first place. If we get to the point where folks are that sort of intense and that invested and the game becomes that focused on, you know, the challenge and, you know, sort of the EPing part of the game, I think we've probably already messed up again. So we'll see how we figure that one out. No Man Stream says, I have 3 kids and a wife. I get to a place and camp there. If groups are full, I just buff or heal and look at EQ and spell effects. When there aren't any, I solo get 1% experience a day and hop in on a duo or trio. Don't run around trying to be with everyone everywhere. Fair. It's funny because it's like I hear a lot of like folks mention I don't like when no one talks in modern MMOs, and I do like that when there's less hand holding and the community's got to figure stuff out and all of that. And so I've been watching our friends and family pretty closely to see how much that's the case, right? Like how much are people talking to each other? A lot of that happens in Discord, which is fine. The talking's talking, especially when it's a concentrated group of folks in one community like that. But it's how much information sharing is going on, how much are people helping each other, how many people are becoming like the mavens that know a little bit of everything and try to help other people out. And that's where they derive some joy. Shit like that, right? And it's been nice to see that that's actually happened a fair bit. We've got a handful of people that are really, oh, hey, yeah, this is kind of a weird quest, or I don't know what hell Sean was thinking on that. But if you do this, right? And it's like, oh, cool, we figured it out. The problem now compared to EQ is the high-end people now include streamer and content creators. I think it's a similar problem though. But we can't bend over backwards for them. If they want to not like something about the game, they're going to not like it. That's just kind of that. The goal is that we make something that individuals that are kind of that are willing to think on their own and have their own opinions enjoy. Belfaster said that. Surely there's a board game designer out there that's a former EQ addict. I think CCG would be a good idea for taverns if you'd be cool having cards as drop. I loved Gwent so much. People can play versus each other while camping. Live from Tulan. But honestly, card games as a side hobby in an MMO seem like a fun idea. One way to potentially do that would have that actually, rather than it be drops that you use directly, have there be a trade skill in somebody that actually makes the cards for it, and then have different drops be components for that person, right? So maybe the game is based off of history and archaeology and stuff, in different things, in research, in astrology, in astronomy, right? And so maybe the notes, not the notes, but essentially imagine like a tarot card or a CCG card. Maybe these cards are derived from various classes like that then can produce them, right? And so it's kind of tied into the fiction. Like the world has a CCG in a sense, and it's the sanctioned cards they come from these sources, and those sources derive their information from different things, right? So, just put a little bit of a fictional wrapper on it, and then boom, put it in. It's really it's a question of just sort of resource allocation, dedication to it. Tell you what, if you tell all of your friends about our game and get all of your guildmates and your family to play later on, and that leads us to having the cash that we need to do extra stuff, then what I'd like to try to promise you, I don't know if I can pinky promise yet. I would like to say that it would be nice. There are a lot of things that it would be nice to spend our money on that aren't like dropping a few million on a new project or whatever. It'd be nice to reinvest in the project and be like, hey, we're doing pretty well right now. So we actually commissioned some cool CCG stuff, blah, 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 for this thing that we're putting in as a, integrated into the game, that kind of thing, right? So I could definitely see, opportunities to add features like that as a result of folks enjoying the core game as it is when we go live. And we may even float some of that stuff out to the community as like a poll or something and be like, hey, we could do this with the cash, we could do that with the cash. What are you guys thinking? Get your opinions on that as well. And there's a lot of that stuff that I can imagine, I can imagine situations where like Ollie's, hey, over the weekend I made this thing. The dude's so fast and he's so creative and good. I could see that, right? Or some of the other programmers on the team, or you say CCG, I can imagine Goblin's ears probably perked up and was like, I'll make some cards.